Welcome back to Terminal Talk.
The podcast where we break down the intersection of offensive security and human psychology.
So, imagine you're a doctor in a London hospital. It's Friday morning, May 12, 2017. You grab your coffee, you walk into the break room, and you glance up at the monitors that are, supposed to show your patient databases.
Right.
But instead of the usual medical records, you're looking at this dark, aggressive red screen. And right there in the middle is a white ticking countdown timer.
Oh, man. And within minutes, that single screen just multiplies. It's on the receptionist's computers. It's in the surgical wards.
Yeah, suddenly the entire hospital is in absolute chaos. Like ambulances carrying critical patients are doing literal U-turns in the driveway because the hospital physically cannot admit anyone.
They're completely locked out.
Completely. In the radiology department, you have doctors burning MRI scans onto optical CDs and shoving them into the hands of taxi drivers to rush across town. The UK's National Health Service, the NHS network, it just simply ceases to exist.
And that red screen didn't stop at the English channel either. Almost simultaneously, across France, these massive automated conveyor belts at Renault car factories just grind to a sudden halt.
Wow.
Yeah. And in Germany, passengers looking up at the Deutsche Bahn info boards for their train schedules, they don't see arrival times. They see that exact same dark red screen with the white timer.
It was a total global meltdown. So in today's deep dive, we're dissecting the nightmare that caused it, WannaCry. We're going to explore this terrifying contrast between an elegant, military-grade exploit engineered in total secret by the NSA and the chaotic, duct-taped worm assembled by North Korean hackers.
It's such a wild contrast.
It really is. And along the way, we'll unpack the morally complex story of a 22-year-old hacker who saved the world for $10 only to find himself in handcuffs.
To really grasp the panic of that morning, I think we have to look at what those hospital workers were actually seeing on their screens. They were looking at a user interface for a program called WannaCryptor 2.0.
Right.
And the design of this interface was masterfully engineered for one thing, which is extreme psychological pressure. The dark red background immediately triggers this sense of emergency. Then the text hits you.
Just bluntly telling you you're doomed.
Exactly. It informs you that your files have been encrypted with a mathematically unbreakable algorithm. You have zero access to your own data.
And then there are those two timers dictating the terms of your survival.
Yeah, the first timer gives you exactly 3 days to pay a ransom of $300 in Bitcoin. If that timer hits zero, the price automatically doubles to $600.
Which is stressful enough, but...
But the second timer is what induces the real terror. That is a 7-day countdown. When that one runs out, the decryption keys are mathematically destroyed. Your data is gone forever.
It's brutal.
But, tucked inside all these terrifying ultimatums was this tiny crucial detail that tipped off analysts. The threatening text was written in really clunky, broken English.
Mm-hmm.
It literally said, "You have not so enough time."
You have not so enough time. That immediately tells you this isn't the polished work of some sophisticated, well-funded Silicon Valley tech giant, right? It's sloppy.
Totally sloppy.
But that broken English was actually a massive misdirection because the engine that delivered this sloppy ransomware was an absolute masterpiece of cyber warfare. To understand how this breached hospital networks in seconds, we really have to look past that red screen and dig into a relic from the 1980s.
Yeah, we are talking about a fundamental application layer network protocol called SMBv1, or Server Message Block version 1.
Oh.
This was designed back in the 80s to handle basic network sharing for Windows.
Right.
So allowing computers on a local network to share files or access the same printers.
Right.
By 2017, SMBv1 was hopelessly outdated. It was incredibly chatty, meaning it constantly pinged the network announcing its presence.
Yeah.
And, it fell way short of modern security standards. But of course, it was still everywhere. Exactly. Like so much in enterprise IT, it was kept alive purely for backward compatibility.
Mm-hmm.
Old custom software needed it to run, so network administrators just left it turned on.
And here is where the story shifts from bad IT hygiene to international espionage, because someone did know about a massive gaping hole in this ancient protocol.
Right.
The United States National Security Agency, specifically their elite hacking unit, Tailored Access Operations, or TAO.
So the vulnerability lived deep inside a Windows kernel driver called srv.sys. Now, standard government procedure usually dictates that when intelligence agencies find a critical flaw in commercial software, they are required to notify the manufacturer, in this case, Microsoft, so a patch can be issued to protect the public.
Right, but there's a loophole.
A huge loophole. If the vulnerability is deemed of exceptional value to national security, They can keep it classified.
And the NSA looked at this SMBv1 vulnerability and decided it was the crown jewels. I mean, they sat on it in absolute silence for over 5 years. They built an exploit around it, codenamed Eternal Blue.
Such a dramatic name.
It is. And this wasn't just a standard hack. It was silent, it required 0 passwords, and most importantly, it granted the attacker remote system-level privileges.
To put that into perspective for you, system-level privilege is the absolute highest level of control possible on a Windows machine. It's even higher than a standard administrator account. You basically have total dominion over the hardware and software.
Wait, so if SMBv1 is basically the internal mailroom of a massive office building,
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
the NSA essentially found a backdoor that let them walk right past the security desk, step directly into the mailroom, and immediately give themselves CEO-level access without ever showing a badge.
Exactly.
They could wander the building, open any door, and do whatever they wanted, totally undetected.
And the NSA actually used Eternal Blue for years as this highly targeted surgical espionage tool. Microsoft's president later compared it to a Tomahawk cruise missile. It was that potent.
But that raises a massive question. How does an elite American cyber weapon end up shutting down German train stations and British hospitals?
Well, because the NSA lost control of their weapons.
Which is still insane to think about.
It's crazy. In August 2016, a highly mysterious hacking group calling themselves the Shadow Brokers just emerged out of nowhere. To this day, their true identity is unknown.
Wow.
Yeah, they might have been NSA insiders, they might have been foreign state-sponsored hackers, but they somehow compromised the NSA's staging servers and stole their top-secret cyber arsenal.
And they didn't just quietly analyze it to defend themselves, right? They tried to monetize it. They staged this incredibly bizarre public auction on the dark web, asking for $600 million for the data dump.
Which is just a staggering amount of money. When absolutely no one bid on it, the Shadow Brokers started posting these angry, taunting rants online. They wrote in broken English, which linguists actually believe was intentional misdirection to hide their true origins.
Ah, clever.
Yeah, and they even tried directly tweeting at the U.S. president. When the extortion completely failed, on April 14, 2017, they took the nuclear option. They dumped the entire NSA arsenal on the public darknet for free.
Anyone could grab it.
Anyone with an internet browser could now download Eternal Blue.
Wait, hold on. This timeline doesn't make sense to me. The Shadow Brokers dumped this code in April. But didn't Microsoft already release a critical patch bulletin, MS-17010, a full month before that public dump?
They did, yeah.
So if the NSA realized their weapons were stolen and tipped Microsoft off to fix it in March, why was May such a global bloodbath?
Because that is the painful, unavoidable reality of corporate IT. Yes, Microsoft rewrote the protocol so the exploit wouldn't work. For you or me at home, patching is easy. You click Update, your laptop reboots, and you're safe.
Right.
But corporate infrastructure is a massive bureaucratic machine. Any system update has to go through endless, rigorous testing cycles to ensure it doesn't break legacy custom software. Plus, you had critical environments like those hospitals and car factories running on Windows XP, an operating system so ancient it was entirely unsupported and didn't even get the patch initially.
Oh, man.
So thousands of huge organizations just left their networks completely exposed because updating was too disruptive.
And into that massive exposure steps the Lazarus Group. This is North Korea's elite military hacking unit. But unlike the NSA, who used Eternal Blue for quiet, targeted espionage, Lazarus had a very different motivation. Money. North Korea was under heavy international sanctions. They needed hard currency fast.
And they knew they had to move quickly. Every day that passed, more corporate networks were applying that Microsoft patch. The window of opportunity was rapidly closing. So they didn't have the time to engineer a sophisticated, stealthy operation.
They just threw it together.
Literally. They took this highly elegant military-grade exploit, Eternal Blue, and practically duct-taped a primitive, sloppy ransomware module onto it.
But to understand why this hastily assembled code was so wildly destructive, we really need to clarify a huge misconception. When the news broke, every headline called WannaCry a deadly new virus. But it wasn't a virus at all.
No. Technically speaking, WannaCry was a worm. And that distinction is exactly why it caused a global meltdown.
How so?
Well, a traditional computer virus, much like a biological virus, requires a host. It needs human interaction to spread. A person has to click a malicious link in a phishing email, plug in an infected USB drive, or, enable a macro in a Word document. It cannot move on its own.
But a worm is autonomous. It's completely self-propagating.
Exactly. WannaCry didn't wait for a stressed-out doctor to click a bad link. It blindly scanned the internet, hunting for port 445, the specific port used by that ancient SMBv1 protocol.
Right.
If it found an open port, it used Eternal Blue to punch a hole, injected a copy of itself, and then that newly infected machine immediately started scanning for victims.
So it didn't spread like a cold where one person sneezes on another. It spread like a forest fire that generates its own wind. I mean, every machine it burned down instantly threw sparks at 1,000 more, completely silently.
Which is exactly why billion-dollar corporate infrastructures were collapsing in a matter of minutes. And while the biggest tech giants and intelligence agencies in the world were scrambling to understand what was happening, the solution ultimately came from a 22-year-old's bedroom in rural southwest England.
This is where we meet Marcus Hutchins, known online by his handle MalwareTech. He was a self-taught cybersecurity analyst working remotely for a company in Los Angeles called Crypto's Logic. Like thousands of other security researchers that Friday, he was watching the global meltdown unfold and decided to grab a sample of the malware to see how it ticked.
Naturally.
So he drops the worm into a sandbox.
And a sandbox, just for context, is a secure, highly isolated virtual machine used to safely analyze malicious code without risking your actual computer. But when Marcus ran WannaCry in his sandbox, the worm just sat there. It did absolutely nothing.
Which is so interesting.
It highlights this fascinating cat-and-mouse game of malware analysis. Malware authors know that researchers will put their code in a sandbox to reverse engineer it. So they build in defense mechanisms. If the malware detects it's being watched in a lab, it stays completely dormant to hide its true capabilities.
And one of the most common checks is to see if the machine is connected to the internet. Because if there's no internet, a worm can't spread, so why bother activating?
Exactly.
But analysts know the malware will look for this. So modern sandboxes are designed to intercept any external web request the malware makes and instantly feed it a fake 200 OK response. It basically lies to the malware saying, yep, the internet is working perfectly, you can reach whatever you want.
And the North Korean authors of WannaCry new sandboxes did this. So they built a trap. Before the worm started encrypting files or spreading, it was programmed to reach out to a massive, unregistered, total gibberish domain name.
Just random letters.
Yeah. The logic from the hackers was actually quite clever. If my malware pings this complete nonsense domain that definitely doesn't exist, and I receive a 200 OK response back, it means I am being lied to. I am in a sandbox being watched by researchers, and I need to immediately self-destruct to hide my code.
Wait, so the malware's logic is entirely backward. If it pings a fake site and gets a friendly hello back, it knows it's trapped in a lab and plays dead. But if it gets dead, silence.
Exactly. Silence means it's out in the wild. If the domain doesn't resolve, the worm thinks, okay, nobody is feeding me fake responses, I am on the real internet.
Yeah.
And that is the trigger for it to activate, encrypt the hard drive, and aggressively spread to the next machine.
That is so wild. So Marcus is staring at this code. He sees this incredibly long gibberish domain. Out of pure habit, he checks to see if it's registered. It isn't, so he just buys it.
For exactly $10.
$10. He wasn't even trying to stop the attack. He thought he was just setting up a sinkhole to track the malware. He wanted to see how many infected machines around the world were trying to contact that address so he could map the physical scale of the epidemic.
But by registering that domain and bringing it online, Marcus inadvertently created a global miracle. Because suddenly that gibberish domain was real. It was live, and it started returning a genuine 200 OK response.
To every single active copy of the WannaCry worm on the entire planet.
Yes, hundreds of thousands of active spreading worms reached out, hit Marcus's newly purchased domain, and got a real 200 OK back.
Oh, man.
The malware panicked. The logic completely flipped on the North Korean creators. Every single instance of WannaCry in the world suddenly believed it was trapped inside a security researcher's sandbox. And following its own strictly hard-coded instructions, the malware shut itself down. Instantly, the global spread stopped dead in its tracks.
A $10 domain purchase accidentally triggered a global kill switch, though it almost collapsed under its own weight, right?
Oh, absolutely. Marcus's servers started getting hammered by millions of pings from infected machines all over the globe. If his server crashed from the traffic, the domain would go offline, the pings would result in dead silence again, and the worm would instantly wake back up and resume burning down networks.
So tense.
The French police actually had to step in to physically protect his servers, and the CEO of Cloudflare quietly donated massive enterprise-level DDoS protection just to keep that $10 domain alive.
That is incredible. But that kill switch stopped the exponential spread. It leaves a massive lingering issue, though. What about the people like our hospital doctor who already had the dark red screen on their monitors?
Right, the timers were still ticking.
Yeah, the kill switch didn't decrypt the locked files.
That's where a different group of heroes steps in with some real technical magic. Independent researchers, including a guy named Adrian Ganay, were desperately looking for a way to save those machines that were already held hostage. They started reverse engineering how WannaCry actually locked the files, and they found a fragile lifeline buried in the way old Windows systems manage computer memory.
How did that work?
Well, to understand this, you need to know how the ransomware secures its lock. When WannaCry infects a machine, it generates a unique pair of cryptographic keys, an RSA 2048 key pair, right there on the victim's local computer.
Got it.
It uses the public key to scramble and lock all the files, and then it heavily encrypts the private key, the only thing that can unlock everything, and saves it to the hard drive.
But to make sure the victim couldn't just search their computer and find the original unencrypted private key, WannaCry had to delete it from the computer's temporary memory, the RAM.
Right.
It used a standard Windows API function called cryptdestroy to wipe it out.
But Adrian Ganay realized something incredible about how operating systems actually work. The OS is inherently lazy.
Lazy.
Yeah, on older systems like Windows XP, cryptdestroy key didn't actually overwrite the memory with zeros. It didn't truly destroy the data at all.
Wait, so if it just flags the space as free but doesn't actually erase the data?
Yes. The underlying prime numbers used to mathematically generate your decryption key are still physically sitting there, floating like ghosts in the computer's memory.
Oh, wow.
As long as the computer hadn't needed to use that specific block of RAM for a new task, those prime numbers were perfectly intact.
That's amazing.
So researchers quickly released a tool called WannaKiwi. It would scan the physical memory space of the WannaCry process in the RAM, hunt down those ghost prime numbers, and mathematically reconstruct the private key to unlock the files.
But there is a brutal catch to this magic trick. It only worked if the terrified victim hadn't panicked and rebooted their computer.
Exactly.
The moment you cycle the power, the RAM is completely wiped clean. Those ghosts vanish. If you just stared at the red screen and left the machine running, WannaKiwi could pull the keys right out of the ether and save your entire hospital database without paying a single dime to the hackers.
It was a brilliant collaborative triumph. Between the $10 kill switch and the RAM extraction, a handful of independent researchers had essentially disarmed the most destructive cyber weapon in human history.
You would assume Marcus Hutchins would be in line for a massive parade, a medal from the government, maybe a knighthood.
You think so?
Instead, 3 months later, he gets handcuffs. Marcus flies to the United States to attend DEF CON and Black Hat, which are the biggest cybersecurity conferences in the world. He spends an entire week in Las Vegas being treated like an absolute Silicon Valley rock star.
Totally.
He's at VIP parties, getting lucrative job offers. People are stopping him in the halls to take selfies. But as he's sitting in the business lounge at the airport, waiting for his flight back to the UK, U.S. Marshals and FBI agents walk right up to him, place him under arrest, and march him out of the terminal.
It's just a shocking scene. But it's because the hero who saved the internet had a deeply hidden dark past. Marcus grew up as a very isolated teenager in rural Britain. His only real sense of community was found on underground hacker forums. By the time he was 15 years old, he had built a botnet controlling 8,000 hijacked computers, and he ran a business called ghost hosting, providing infrastructure for phishing sites.
We really need to look at the psychology of this, though. When you're a teenager sitting in a dark bedroom behind a screen, you don't see the victim. You aren't physically reaching into a woman's purse to steal her wallet. You're just typing syntax into a terminal window.
Exactly. It's incredibly abstract.
It feels like a complex puzzle, a video game, right up until the moment the FBI shows up. But the game got very, very real when Marcus was 16. A hacker who went by the alias Vinny hired him to write a rootkit, a tool for silent remote system control called UPS-Kit.
And Marcus did it, rationalizing that he was just writing the software, not pulling the trigger.
Yep.
But that rationalization collapsed when Vinny demanded Marcus build a web inject module. Now, a web inject is a highly malicious mechanism designed to alter the HTML of a banking page in real time on the victim's browser.
Nasty stuff.
Very. It intercepts web traffic so the attacker can drain funds directly from an innocent person's bank account.
And that's when Marcus realized he was crossing a massive line. This wasn't digital mischief anymore. This was actual devastating theft. He tried to walk away, but he couldn't.
Vinny blackmailed him.
Yeah. The hacker knew Marcus's real name and his parents' home address and explicitly threatened to hand him over to the FBI if he didn't finish the job.
So under extreme duress, Marcus built the core architecture for what would become Kronos, one of the most devastating banking trojans of its era. It was sold on Russian underground forums for $7,000 a pop, and it ravaged bank accounts across Europe and Canada.
Now, Marcus didn't write the final banking module itself, but he designed the architecture that made the weapon possible. The crushing guilt of knowing his code was stealing real money from innocent people broke him.
It completely changed him.
He completely abandoned all black hat hacking. He shut down his illicit servers, started his MalwareTech blog specifically to teach people how to defend against the very malware he used to write, and he went totally straight.
Which is ironically the only reason he was in a position and had the skills to stop WannaCry in the first place.
Exactly. But the internet remembers forever. The FBI eventually tracked his old aliases, and the past caught up with him at the Vegas airport.
So he was facing a federal trial in 2019. And we need to be clear about the stakes here. The federal conviction rate in the United States is over 95%.
He was facing 10 counts and up to 40 years in a federal penitentiary.
Realizing the impossible odds, Marcus struck a deal and pled guilty to 2 counts related to writing the Kronos and UPAS kit code,
Which presented the presiding judge, J.P. Stadtmuller, with an absolutely unprecedented ethical dilemma. I mean, how on earth do you sentence a man whose teenage mistakes caused millions in damage, but whose adult actions literally saved global infrastructure from total collapse?
The judge's decision was shockingly humane. He sentenced Marcus to time served, meaning absolutely no additional prison time, 1 year of supervised release, and 0 financial fines.
Wow.
The judge recognized that Marcus had already turned his life around on his own accord long before he was ever caught. He even advised Marcus right there in the open courtroom to seek a presidential pardon so he wouldn't be deported, ensuring he could keep working to protect the internet.
It is an incredible arc of redemption, especially when you contrast Marcus's deep understanding of the internet with the hackers who actually unleashed WannaCry. The Lazarus Group's operation was an absolute amateurish failure.
Oh, completely. They caused an estimated $4 to $8 billion in global economic damage. But how much did they actually make from all those red screens demanding Bitcoin?
I'm guessing not much.
About $100,000.
Yeah.
Only 338 people actually paid the ransom.
Because they were utterly incompetent. They hard-coded exactly 3 Bitcoin wallets into the global worm. Any competent criminal generates a unique, distinct wallet for every single victim so they can track exactly who paid and who didn't.
Right. Lazarus had absolutely no way of knowing who sent the money, meaning they probably never even intended or had the ability to give the decryption keys back in the first place.
It was total negligence from top to bottom. And it leaves us with an incredible irony. Our modern, highly advanced digital world almost entirely collapsed because of a single, overlooked variable in an ancient, obsolete 1980s protocol.
And we only survived the fallout because a 22-year-old in his bedroom spent $10 on a DNS request. It's a stark reminder to update your systems.
It really is. And I want to leave you with one chilling thought to ponder as you log off today. We just spent this entire deep dive detailing how a highly elegant military-grade cyber weapon built by the NSA was duct taped together by desperate amateurs into the most destructive worm in history. In 2017, that catastrophic combination required human hands to write the duct tape. But what happens to our global infrastructure tomorrow when artificial intelligence is the one writing the duct tape? Think about that the next time you walk into a hospital and look at a computer screen, hoping you don't see a ticking white timer.